Okay, great. So we can get this party started.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. Okay, so cool. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you are going to be here, I'm really, really sorry. We are like 43 minutes late. We had some technical difficulties. Thank you, Be Live. But we have finally managed to like connect everything, the planets aligned, so that we can still have this chat today. I'm really, really psyched. Like I was really looking forward to this talk, Aimee, because I'm really passionate about everything that is nutrition and healthy eating and stuff. And I was like, man, I'm really, really curious to find out more.
Yeah.
And I was also checking for stuff on Instagram. I'm going to tell you all about it. So thank you for being here, Aimee. I'm really, really happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, I lost my agenda. So basically, I lost the links to your Instagram and everything else. But no worries, I'm gonna find that later on in the show. Okay, so very, very cool. Aimee, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, and while you are introducing yourself, I will also try to reach out for the links that I was mentioning.
Right. So my name's Aimee. I'm from Maryland. I live close to Baltimore. And you can find me on Instagram or Facebook, the AK Kitchen, and my website is theakkitchen.com. And beyond doing sort of like a food or nutrition blog, my main goal is to really focus on substitutions for ingredients or things that maybe you have an intolerance or you're trying to eat healthier. So my main goal is to help make that an easier process for people to figure out.
Mm-hmm. I really like that part, right? Like the ingredient swap part. Mm-hmm. What is that all about? How do you define that? And how does it happen, like on a practical level?
Right. So I think, the world of gluten-free and dairy-free and vegan and paleo, and now there's Whole30, and all these things are just really blowing up. And some of the more successful sort of protocols like Whole30, they have everything laid out for you, but a lot of people don't necessarily want to do like a full elimination like that. Maybe some people are a little skeptical. Maybe it's just a little overwhelming, and it's just so many restrictions that they're not ready for it. And some people, it's like, oh, I just learned I have this allergy, and I just need to focus on one thing. And a lot of people, they still love to eat what they used to like to eat before having to restrict their diet. And just so many people have a hard time. I just hear constantly, I'm so frustrated. I went to the store and I didn't know what to do, or what do I do when I go to a restaurant? And there's just so much back end work that goes into figuring out what tastes good, how you can eat the things you used to love to eat, and still just be able to enjoy food without the stress. I know for myself, a big period of time was a lot of that stress. It was very challenging. In some ways, it was exciting for me because I got to try new techniques, new foods, things like that. So I find a lot of people, they don't like to put in the back end work, and it can be made easier without having to do like a Whole30 or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get into this? Like, I know that you are a student, so you are basically studying nutrition. How did you get into studying this? Do you have like intolerances yourself, or somebody around you had it?
Yeah, so I was born with a dairy intolerance, but that has sort of changed and it's come and gone in my life. As a child, I was able to eat a lot of it, but then eventually I started to have more problems with it, and I had to be more restrictive with it. And then eventually I know for many people that there's a similar narrative in, oh, I got really sick and I took all these medications for it, antibiotics, things like that, and I just got a horrible bug. And it just kind of hit me one thing after the other, and eventually I started to cut out a bunch of other things for my health, like gluten, and eventually I tried the paleo thing for stress and blood sugar. So it's very, true to my life that I went through a lot of those challenges and I overcame them. And to this day, I eat a lot of the foods that I used to eat, just in a modified form. So I took on that challenge because I love to cook. It's my favorite thing to do. I've always been in the kitchen. So a lot of people, they just don't like to do that. And it's hard for them to learn all these things. And Google is so massive. It's hard to know, what do I Google to figure out what those swaps are? So I think there should be a resource for people to sort of go, hey, I kind of want to substitute, this ingredient. What do I do? So I think, there's so much community that can be built around that back end work, not necessarily just the struggle or the exciting food that is available. There's a lot that goes into it, and no one really talks about that sort of messy part of it.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Like, I'm very big on nutrition, and I'm very opinionated about this. Like, I have my way of seeing the world and how healthy eating, for example, looks like. But I also understand that, as you said, right? So it's not only about Google. It's basically about the fact that we live in a world that is like full of information. Like, we are overloaded with information, and it's quite difficult really to make a decision and to be like, okay, I think that being vegan is really truly the safest and healthiest way. Because then there are people who bring you a lot of arguments that are more or less valid against being vegan, no? And then there are a lot of people who are bringing arguments for paleo and so on and so forth. So tell me exactly, like, how is it like now? What are you eating? What do you feel that is the healthiest way to eat from your perspective? And how is it that you are helping other people define what is healthy for them?
Right. That's a great question. I was just talking to a client about this the other day. So for my school program, I'm in a master's program for nutrition, and we have our own clinic, our own student clinic, and we host like mock consultations. And I was just telling her, she was trying all these different protocols, and she's like, well, I don't follow it perfectly. Sometimes I go out and I get something and it's breaded with corn. And I said, well, do you feel bad when you have it? Do you have any reaction within a day, 2 days? She said, no. I said, well, then that's fine. It's perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay for you. It doesn't have to be a perfect paleo diet. So for me, a lot of my issues stem from stress and digestion, things like that. So right now I am eating a lot of fish, and I love to eat carbs. For a couple of months, I was having some blood sugar issues related to healing my gut, which is normal. I don't have diabetes, but it's normal to have gut issues and sort of blood sugar issues at the same time. So I went the paleo route and the low carb route, and that really, really helped me heal. But then as soon as I felt healed and repleted, my body just started craving carbs like crazy, but very specific things. So there's brown rice, sweet potatoes, and, I don't have limitations for myself as long as I feel good. A couple of months ago when I was doing the low carb route, even fish was a little too much for me. So like right now, I'm eating very different things than what I did 6 months ago. It's all about just listening to what your body says. One morning I just woke up really craving rice, and I went with it. So, I don't really like to put a label, because my cravings, my diet changes constantly.
It's very interesting. There is like this. I like this. I like the part about like listening to your body. But what I realized for myself, for example, so for me, it has been, I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for 7 years now, and now I'm going into veganism, and I'm very serious about it. Like, I am very serious about, I'm becoming an activist for that. And I realized that, for example, sugar is something that I was trying to like, refined sugar was something that I've tried and I'm still trying, because like I have days when I still have it. So I realized that this for me didn't really work, the thing about listening to your body, because the body like speaks through the mind, and the mind has a certain way of seeing reality. And my mind has been on sugar for like 27 years, like 29 years, right? And then all of a sudden I decided that sugar is not a good thing. So the mind is like, no, we like sugar. Let's go full in with sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's very important as well, because I also had an issue with sugar. So just refined sugar, I was very addicted to it. And you can create all kinds of imbalances. And when there is an imbalance, you'll crave something maybe, and it might not necessarily be your natural physiology craving. It could be the imbalance is feeding off of that. And if you're sort of in an imbalanced state, then your body might not be telling you the right thing. So what's important is to be able to understand what your natural imbalances are. So for me, that is sort of the gut imbalance, and some of that comes with the sugar. Once I was able to be extremely mindful of it and aware of like what those symptoms look like when I am craving a lot of sugar, how I should handle it, and just how you have to balance your everyday life. I think just starting out, one sort of thing might lead to another imbalance, and just doing what you think is right might not necessarily be exactly what your body wants to tell you. So there's so much that goes on, and I think if we had an understanding of physiology, then like a true understanding of it, then we wouldn't need to have this conversation. Everybody would be able to know what makes them feel good. So I think that's very, very hard to do, but something that I'm lucky enough to have been able to figure it
out. Was it like by trial and error, or
Absolutely.
So there are no principles that like sugar is not bad for everybody?
Right. Some people some people have a high tolerance for it. At this point in my life, I personally don't. So I'm very careful even with fruit and how much fruit I'm eating and how I'm balancing that out with other nutrients. People talk about counting macros and this and that, and how, all of that feeds into body positivity and eating disorders and things like that. And I think there is something good about paying attention to your macros, but being hyper focused on it isn't necessarily as good either. So I think having hyper focus on anything could be, give you potential to have an imbalance further down the road. But just paying attention to, I'm craving a lot of sugar. Maybe I need more protein, or maybe I need more fat. Maybe I'm hungry for something else. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's really hard to figure out. Certainly a nutritionist or a functional medicine professional can really help you figure that out. But even as a professional myself and talking to people, it's so hard to understand what it's like to live in someone else's body and what their body's truly craving. So it does take trial and error for every single person. There's no one doctor or nutritionist that's going to say, this is how you're going to do it, unless they're brilliant. They have, all the lab work laying out, and they all know how to read everything, and they've been practicing for like over 30 years. That's the kind of person you want to look for. And just what I've heard from my professors and just how I've heard them talk about their practice.
Sorry, so I'm listening to you. I just need to charge my computer because BeLive already sucked up a lot of battery. So I'm curious, maybe we can just you can make the distinction. You are calling macros the macronutrients, right? So what's the difference between macro and micronutrients? Yeah.
So macronutrients are your basics. It's the protein, fat, and carbs. So for me, I balance that out and just paying attention to each meal and each day. And, did I get enough protein today? Maybe that's why I'm tired, things like that. I just pay attention to that and think about what I ate in the morning. And I don't necessarily keep a journal unless I really need to, but I just sort of have that mental process with me throughout every day. And then micros are going to be your vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, antioxidants. Those are really important because you need to have those play well together, and they also need to play well together with the macros. So certain nutrients, you don't absorb them without other nutrients, and they all play a role together, and it's very hard for the average person to balance that. It's a lot of information to learn, but I think once you get to a point of understanding your body, healing your body, and really being mindful, then it's a lot more intuitive. And just the people that I have worked with, it's amazing what the human body can do without your knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. We are I am in awe for the marvelous, wondrous, miraculous thing that is our body, and of course body, mind, together are doing this. Yeah, absolutely. But it's like I was thinking, right? I think that I'm a person who more or less knows some certain information about this, but I was thinking about, like, it feels so complex now. So many people are trying and striving so hard to eat in a healthy, what they believe to be a healthy way, but then it feels that it's really, really, truly so complex. So what would, like, the normal average person do if they want to adopt a healthy eating pattern?
Right. So I think after having worked with people and having spent so much time and so many years on that myself, I think your best bet is to really go see a nutritionist, especially someone who's in the holistic field and they're not necessarily focusing on the math and the calories and the weight and the BMI. Somebody who's going to look at all of your symptoms. They're going to ask you every question about your life. How's your stress? How's your sleep? Because all of those things play a major role in the way your nutrition translates. So things like stress can, be kind of like anti-nutrient. They kind of prevent you from absorbing nutrients. And then they'll also take all that information and look at, hopefully a diet journal with you and say, hey, I think you're a very active person, or I think you're not a very active person, or I notice these symptoms and you're eating these things. Why don't we try this? And they can kind of help you with that trial and error and making those adjustments and figuring out what is really going to make you feel good, and not just say, well, I think you need to try this protocol. Because I have worked with nutritionists who just sent me tons of supplements and who just said, oh, you need to be eating this Mediterranean anti-inflammatory diet. But those times that I've done that, I actually got a lot sicker because they didn't help me figure out what was really going on that made me feel good. And they were sort of focusing on, oh, we need to build this stuff up, and not helping me with that trial and error. It's a lot of baby steps and it takes time. But I think nutritionists really will focus in on those aspects for you. And especially if you ask them, hey, I want to know what's going on with my diet and how well it's balanced.
So at this moment you are eating paleo, right? This is your...
More or less. I recently introduced rice, but and some other grains, but I don't eat them constantly. So it's like, when someone asks, I say generally paleo because that's what I mostly eat, but it varies.
So basically that's a lot of raw meat, right?
No, so there's varying degrees of paleo. So, today we don't know exactly what they ate in the Paleolithic period because there's no documentation. So there's raw paleo, which is raw meat, but there's also paleo, which is more like the grain-free movement, and it's just only natural sweeteners, no grains, limited with starch and potato, things like that, and then a lot of protein, a lot of meat. So I've sort of shifted that and eating just like a lot of fish right now instead of not quite as much meat as I usually do. So, like I said, it varies.
Okay, I get it. I do have a question. Like, I want to get to another aspect, but just before that, I was thinking if, as a nutritionist, do you feel that you are prepared to help people prevent diseases, or do you feel that it's more about offering them solutions once they got already, like, maybe burnout, or like they have a certain disease?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. I think it's hard to talk to someone who feels healthy. They think they're doing the right things. They don't look at any food as making them feel bad. A lot of people won't even relate symptoms they're having to what they're eating. So that's really, really hard to talk to someone and say, hey, changing a little bit of what you're doing could prevent diseases, because they don't necessarily think that they're at risk. So a lot of people that will generally seek out a nutritionist are already going to have some kind of symptom that they want to handle. But ideally, what we always talk about in school and just with our professors is we would be seeing people far before symptoms even arise. You know, when you have a symptom, you know, your body has warning signals, and when you have a symptom, it's already too late. So the important thing is do something about it before you have symptoms. Make sure everything's going well. Sort of like when you get dehydrated, it takes a really long time to rehydrate. So the important thing is you don't get dehydrated. When you have thirst and you feel thirsty, that's a sign that your body's telling you you're already way too late to drink water. So go do something about it right this second.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is, so I don't know if you are familiar with Ritual. I love Ritual, and guys, if you've been probably following this podcast, who have been following this podcast, I really love Ritual. He's a vegan athlete, and he's an activist, and he's a person together with his wife. They are talking a lot about healthy eating and healthy being, and so on and so forth. And he's bringing actually this issue of prevention and how to use food for prevention, because he's from the States, so he's focusing a lot on what the situation is in America today. And just today I was listening to his podcast. He's talking to, I forgot who, one of the guys who opened the wholesale market. I forgot exactly whom he was talking to, but basically they were talking about this, like a huge percentage of people are overweight, and I don't know, 30% diabetes, 70% overweight. Like the stats are talking for themselves, right? And the question is, why is it that we are not helping people eat in a way that is keeping them healthy, instead of basically feeding them information that is helping them get to a point where there is not much to be done? Or even diabetes. So there are like people who were able to heal themselves by following a certain diet, and this was in particular a plant-based diet. So it's interesting for me, the fact that like, for example, at school, do you have certain principles that say, okay, so this is healthy, no question about that, and this is unhealthy, no question about that?
There's a little bit, and you know, I think a lot of that sort of goes without saying, and it's sort of just touched upon, because our main focus is really this is not what people should be doing. Our main focus is, how are people suffering? What are people saying? Like, we just don't put any judgment really out into the world. We sort of focus on the individual, and it's really case by case. You might have somebody who has IBS, but they also have Hashimoto's, and their story is going to be very different from someone who's just, hey, I'm getting ready for my wedding and I want to look good. And there's just so much in between. There's so much gray area that it's not helpful to really say, oh, we just can't talk about that. I mean, there are certain things like artificial sweeteners that we just, you know, get a little excited about, and some of my teachers will say, I'm so against this, but we like to focus more on the science and what is good, and how, you know, what good properties lie in real food, and talking about that so we know what that's about, versus, you know, criticizing every diet. Because, you know, I could say I don't approve of veganism, but it doesn't make me feel good, but it might make you feel amazing. So it's not part of the conversation. The conversation is really like, who are you talking to? What are they feeling? What are they eating? How's their body responding to it? So, you know, that conversation can go so many directions.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I'm gonna go back to what you said. I just wanted to to bring clarity over this dude. So his name is John McKay. He's from the Conscious Capitalism movement, and he's the CEO of the Whole Foods markets. So they were having, like, Ritual was having this chat with him. It's not important just for you watching, and if you are curious to hear more about it. I absolutely hear you, but I also feel that I think it's not about judging, though it's very difficult to be perceived as non-judgmental when you are saying, I believe that veganism and a plant-based diet is the way to go about it.
Right.
But that's not to say that I believe that what you are eating or other person is eating is wrong. I just feel that for me, for myself, that is the way to go about things. And then there are things such as processed meat. You get what I'm saying? Like that's number one carcinogenic. There is no debate about that. And the fact that some people fail to discuss the obvious, like the elephant in the room, for me, that's it's not okay. You get what I'm saying? Because we need to bring that to light. I feel that it's important to hear that. Apart from like being like a diet is a very subjective topic, and I think it has a lot to do with personal freedom and choices and so on and so forth. But I think that there is also a need for studies that are backing certain facts, such as this one. They need to be more visible in the public eye, and for us to understand that certain things are really damaging our health, and that we can actually do something about that, which is just choosing consciously for ourselves.
Right. And I think, I guess like now that we're talking about it, I realize a lot of what we do learn on this subject is sort of the science that goes into why it's bad. You know, why is a grass-fed, pasture-raised cow so much better than, you know, something that's grain-fed and doesn't get to roam? And we just learned the science behind it so that we know how to talk to someone and not just say, this is bad for you. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they think, okay, well, the price tag is what I care about. Yeah. And really it's important to say, okay, well, this is really what happens to the cow when, you know, and then what happens to you when you consume this type of product. And I think that's really eye-opening for people. And there's so much, as you're saying, there's so much opinionated media, and I think really the research and the studies are what are so important. And I think a lot of what we learn is just trying to be really strategic in that and not have too loud of a voice and be very gentle. And I think coaxing people, guiding people, educating people is really helpful in helping people to change their minds and not just shouting it from the rooftops, because not everyone responds to that. Some people do, and we get so many people from that, which is amazing. You know, I mean, they're called movements for a reason. But I think a lot of people are still a little skeptical or still contemplating. I don't know if I believe in that, but science is really science, and you can't really debate that.
Yeah, I think that this is probably my case is really about that. Like, apart from my opinion and your opinion, the fact that people like wake up and they are like, oh, I'm curious about the ingredients that this pasta has. No, and just them having the click and going and searching the ingredients, for me, that is like huge. You get what I'm saying? That means that we are taking responsibility for our health. And of course, somebody who goes to see a nutritionist, it depends. Maybe they are sick, maybe they aren't. Maybe they just want to like improve the way that they are leading their life. That's huge. That is really, really very valuable.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of people will say there's always more that you can do, and, you know, you have to change and be so dramatically different. But I think the fact that people are asking questions means they're taking the right steps. Maybe they don't do the research. Maybe they don't read all their ingredient labels. But the fact that they started and they asked the questions and they maybe check the ingredient labels on something, that's, you know, the beginning. And maybe not every person is going to make all of those changes, but I think as a culture, as a society, as a country, the more questions each person asks, the better it is. And I don't discourage it if somebody's not doing so many different things, but they're asking questions. I always encourage, okay, you're making the right steps, just keep going with that. And when you encourage that instead of discourage it by saying you need to do all of this, then I think people are going to start asking more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. One step at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's very beautiful also, the fact that each of us has an opinion. There is space for everybody to have an opinion, and like you learn a lot by sharing and by asking other people, and not asking because I already know the answer and I just want to like verify it by you, because I'm genuinely curious. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
what's the deal with you? Why are you taking, where you're adopting that lifestyle? Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we spoke a lot about dietary things, and we didn't really get to the whole business aspect of what you are doing. Not business in the monetary thing, but you went into this, and this is your profession for a reason, right? So what was the motivation behind that?
So I knew I wanted to do nutrition and learn nutrition before college. I've always loved to cook, but having the dairy intolerance, I sort of thought, I don't know that I want to do culinary school because there's so many things that I would learn to make that I couldn't eat. And that was frustrating to me. And I didn't know that I would feel as comfortable. I didn't know I would feel like I would fit in. So my undergrad, I decided not to do nutrition, and I did sort of like the anthropology aspect and learning what people are like, what people want to know, and just how people operate. And then after college, I realized, I still want to do this nutrition thing. I still want to cook. And by then I had worked on so many more dietary restrictions that it became this challenge, and it became this huge part of my life. And it became this thing that I realized, like, okay, I put in so much effort, and there is a way to do this culinary thing and have the joy of food and be on the same level as some of these, people who went to culinary school and they're chefs now. But there's just so much more to it than just, oh, I cook food, I make these beautiful treats. It's, I put a lot of effort. There was a lot of challenge. I used cauliflower for this, or I used almond flour, things that are really non-conventional, and it tastes amazing. And, there's so much excitement in creating. And I'm an artist as well, so just the creation aspect was really motivating for me. But I realized along the way that not everyone has that motivation, and it makes a big deal of help for someone who's feeling lost in sort of these ingredient swaps and a dietary change, when someone's there to help them, someone who has experienced it, someone can teach them and share recipes and things like that.
Yeah, I'm curious about your artistic side. What is it that you're creating, or what are you passionate about?
So I love to paint with watercolor. That's always been my favorite. I did quite a bit of photography in high school and a little bit in college. I sort of fell out of it after a while, starting the nutrition thing. But after sort of starting a blog and an Instagram page, I kind of realized how much everything that I love to do brings back to sort of my main thing. And, the art kind of plays into it, and creating and cooking, and the dietary change and how it goes into balancing recipes. So everything sort of came together for me, and that was really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Like your Instagram feed looks really, really nice. And I was really curious because you posted several weeks ago, I think, this photo on collagen. So are you taking supplements or something, right?
Yeah. So I do take collagen daily, so it really helps with my gut health. I just found that it really helps. But also in some of my health history, I had a lot of damage to my skin and my hair. It started to get really thin and just brittle. And so that was also really important to me. Girls got to have nice hair. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I do take supplements. Not everybody's able to get all their nutrients from food, so that just depends on the person.
Yeah, cool. I was really curious about that because, like, I think I took some collagen pills, but like 1 month.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm gonna get like all childlike after this.
It depends. I think that is an interesting question. So I also have like mild protein deficiency. So if you have a protein deficiency, the collagen's going to act on that first. And then after some time, it will start to act on the hair and the skin, things like that. So, biochemistry is really amazing in that it's going to figure out like, oh, what do I need this for first? Sort of like when your bones break down for calcium, your body figures out, okay, what do we need right now? What can we do about
it? Yeah, cool. I'm gonna look more into collagen because it's really something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, cool. So we are close to the end. I just want to ask you, what is it that you find most rewarding in what you are doing right now?
I think the most rewarding is figuring out a recipe that works, something where it's sort of unexpected ingredients and the chemistry and the flavors work just right, that, you know, people who do eat gluten and soy and things like that, that other people might not be able to eat, can still enjoy it. So something where a person has restrictions, they can make a treat that everyone likes to eat. And it's not just like, oh, this is that person's treat and it's not as desirable. It's no, this is an amazing treat. It just happens to be really healthy. But also just hearing from people, hey, I switched this up and I'm feeling really good. Just seeing people make changes, ask questions. I think the curiosity behind food and nutrition is so exciting to me, that when I'm able to inspire other people to sort of ask questions and try things out for themselves, then that's really cool, because I can learn from them and say, hey, that's a situation or a substitution I would not have thought of. So that's really rewarding, and just getting new ideas from people who were inspired by me.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I'm already inspired. Like, I'm thinking about learning more about how other people are. Like, for me, this is a very interesting thing to understand, that health and healthy eating looks very different from person to person.
Absolutely.
And I think that each of us are very opinionated, and we're like, but I'm eating very healthy. And then you hear somebody who has a very different opinion than yours, and you're like, yeah, interesting.
Yes, because every body is so individual, and it is true that like each body, each biology is so unique to that person, that you can't say this is the right way to eat, because each person's going to react so differently. So I always love to hear what other people are eating as well, because it's just, what do you feel good eating? And you said you love to eat the plant-based diet, and that's really cool. I find that so fascinating. I know for myself it does not make me feel good, but I just love to see what people are doing in that respect.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, Aimee. It was a really cool discussion. I really appreciate your time and the fact that we went through technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Cool. So people can find you on Instagram and on Facebook at the AK Kitchen, and then your website too, which is the akkitchen.com. Yeah, cool. And you will find all the links in the video, guys, afterwards. Thank you very much, Aimee, and thank you everybody who watched.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.